Good. Hello and welcome one more time. This is Coloniality of Digital Infrastructure, part of the Building Laterally event series hosted by the Digital Infrastructure Incubator at Code for Science and Society. I am Rhea El Zain. I'm a white woman with a sharp face and glasses. I have a big smile. My moving image is beaming into your office or your kitchen or your car from Philadelphia, which is Lenape territory. Thanks for being here. Spanish-English interpretation is enabled for this event. Just a heads up that our speakers will be speaking in different languages. To enable translation, click the icon of the globe in the bottom of the Zoom window and click the channel for the language that you'd like to hear. You'll note that you can also mute the original language. If you are watching the recording, I hope the recording of the other language will be available in the description below. Closed captioning for the English audio is enabled for this event. You can turn on the live transcript by pressing the CC icon also in the bottom of the Zoom window. A reminder to all our speakers and question askers that this works best when we speak slowly. I'll quickly walk us through the general structure of this call and the tools we're using. You'll notice we're in a regular Zoom meeting. Feel free to do what's comfortable with your camera, but do keep muted until we're in the Q&A. The other tool we're using is a public Google Doc. Danielle just bumped it and Angela just bumped it again. Thank you both. We invite all participants to add their names and affiliation to the roll call on page 7. This is a way of saying hi in the absence of bumping into each other on the way to the bathroom or whatever. If you have announcements or resources that you'd like to share with the group, please include those in the right column. The doc also hosts our agenda for today. On page 4, you'll find a general plan. On page 5 and 6, our speaker bios. And on page 8, some support for the question and answer portion of the event. At any time during this event, you can type a question into that Google Doc or into the Zoom chat, and we will collect them. If you'd like to speak your question during the Q&A, you can type the word stack into the Zoom chat or use the raise your hand function, and I'll repeat those again when we get there. We're also collecting resources shared today in this doc. The doc will stay open for 24 hours and then we'll close it, and you can find it on the incubator website. Finally, a code of conduct guides our engagement here. It's linked in the Google document on page 2, replete with how to make a report. At CS&S, we strive to create safe, inclusive spaces where people can learn from each other. We are committed to providing a harassment-free environment where everyone, regardless of gender, gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, ability, physical appearance, body size, race, age, religion, or work experience. We try at CS&S to understand the difference between intent and impact, and our code of conduct is guided by those commitments. At the end of our event today, we'll ask for your feedback in a quick survey, but Angela maybe can go ahead and link it now. That's great. Please do fill it out. Your feedback helps us secure funding to continue to do work like this. Okay, I think that is everything. Did I miss anything, Angela or Danielle?
Super. I've just noticed a bunch of other people coming into the room. So maybe once more, this event is simultaneously translated. And if you go to the globe icon on the bottom of your Zoom screen, you can select whether you'd like to hear the event in English or Spanish.
Perfect. Thanks, Danielle. And so this is Danielle Robinson, Executive Director of Code for Science and Society.
Hi, everyone. I'm so grateful to our speakers for spending time with us today. And I want to do a very quick introduction to Code for Science and Society and our work. Does everyone see my slides? I have slides so that I remember what it is I want to say. I see some thumbs up. Great. So hello, I'm Danielle. I'm the Executive Director of Code for Science and Society, and I'm based in Portland, Oregon, where it is not raining. Portland is in the northwest corner of the US, and it is the traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Clackamas, bands of the Chinook, and many other tribes. We're at the confluence of 3 rivers, so it's really beautiful, a beautiful place to be. And what is Code for Science and Society, and why are we doing this work with Raya and our speakers? So our mission, we were founded in 2016, is to advance the power of data to improve the social and economic lives of all people. That means something different in 2022 than it meant in 2016. So we're founded with this core mission of advancing the power of data to improve lives. And data is, of course, all around us and in use by the entities that we interact with and shapes our daily experiences. But there is a little bit less utopian, tech utopianism today than perhaps there used to be. And so our vision and our approach is to take a community-centric approach. We imagine a future where communities can build research and collect data and build technology initiatives to grow global access to knowledge and shift power to communities that have been harmed and excluded. And there's really no data or software tool or app that's going to change the world. But when communities use technology for meaningful empowerment, that does have a chance. And so that's the approach that we're taking. We work across open source software, open data, and other open knowledge initiatives to promote access to knowledge. And we're seeking to connect with people and projects who are headed in the same direction. What does it mean in actuality? We run programs that provide funding and resources to emerging communities, programs that provide spaces for research and practice to evolve, like how technology is created and who it serves and who governs it. And we also provide practical and strategic support via fiscal sponsorship. So we act as an umbrella org, and there are many cool projects under our umbrella. Why are we doing this work with the Digital Infrastructure Incubator? This incubator seeks to bridge theory and practice. So take some of the ideas around open source and talk to the people who are building things and see how things play out in reality. And a major part of that is, of course, power, labor, governance, and power. And this, I said power twice, but maybe I meant to do that. But these are key conceptions to how we understand infrastructure. And our ecosystem, we have a chance at shifting power if we understand where it lies. And I think we'll dig into a little bit of that today as we think about the coloniality of digital infrastructure as a concept. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and stop talking. And I'm just so grateful and honored to host our two speakers today. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. As she mentioned, I'm Raya, and I'm here today as the program manager for the Digital Infrastructure Incubator. That link has just been bumped in the chat. The incubator is a new capacity building program for open source digital public infrastructure projects. As part of that program, we've curated a public event series, of which you are now a part, Building Laterally, the Political Imagination to Support and Sustain Digital Infrastructure. Is designed to connect conversations about sustainability, governance, and community health in open source to larger political debates. This is the fourth event of 5 in that series. It started with a discussion about labor, and it moved. Our second event was about the proliferation of anti-oppression discourse and anti-oppression frameworks focused on history of codes of conduct in the space. Our most recent event in January examined project governance and the range of possibilities and limitations of models like duocracy, mutual aid. Recordings of our past events are up on that link that Angela just bumped. And our final event coming up in April will showcase the work of our current cohort and explores the practice of building digital infrastructure. Today's event is Coloniality of Digital Infrastructure, and it is meant to continue the series' emphasis on digital infrastructure and power, how to identify it, how to analyze it and critique it, but also how to build it. I'm excited to be hosting a transnational and truly interdisciplinary conversation, bringing technologists and community leaders working in art curation, archives, and museums, together with those thinking about protecting the land, preserving Indigenous knowledges. I believe these kinds of work, understanding art and history and and preserving and defending the land are intimately connected. And while I don't know exactly where our conversation will go today, I'm excited about the possibilities of productive cross-pollination. So without any further ado, let's get into it. I've invited our speakers to speak for about 15 minutes each about the work they do. There'll be some time for some discussion between them and some facilitated conversation before we move into a Q&A. Before I introduce them, I'd like to introduce our translator, whose voice some of you have been hearing already. Rocio Amorosa Koba is a freelance conference interpreter and translator based in Quito and an active member of the AIIC, the International Association of Conference Interpreters. Since 2006, she has provided professional interpreting services in Spanish, English, and French to a myriad of entities. Thank you for being here with us, Rocio, and for just doing the awkward thing of translating your own bio. But we really appreciate you're here and the knowledge that you bring as well. Okay. Perfect. Luis is the director of the ECA Amaraquieri, an indigenous organization that co-manages, together with the Peruvian National Service of Natural Areas Protected by the State, the section of the Peruvian Madre de Dios that is part of the ancestral territory of the Harakput peoples. Since 2006, the collaboration between indigenous peoples and the Peruvian state to monitor the reserve has included the use of state-of-the-art technology, such as the app Mapio and drones, by community guards, park rangers, and technicians. This is done to protect their ancestral forests from illegal mining and logging. Their exemplary efforts have been recognized by the Equator Prize in 2019. Luis is the former president of the indigenous organization Coharima, and please join me in welcoming Luis. Luis, the floor is yours.
Hola Rocío, gracias por la presentación y agradecer la invitación, ¿no? Para participar en este espacio. Como me presentó Rocío, soy Luis Tayori, yo soy de Madre de Dios del pueblo originario de Harakput y mi cargo actual es, soy parte del directorio, no soy presidente, y donde yo provengo es un área natural protegida de la categoría de reserva comunal Maracay, una reserva de los indígenas y el Estado, como indicó a partir de
We will come back to him. But our other speaker on this panel is Chao Tayiana Maina. Hi, Chao. Chao is a Kenyan digital heritage specialist and a digital humanities scholar working at the intersection of culture and technology. She is a computer scientist by profession and a historian by passion. Her work primarily focuses on the application of technology in the preservation, engagement, and dissemination of African heritage. She is the co-founder of African Digital Heritage, a co-founder of the Museum of British Colonialism, and a co-founder of the Open Restitution Africa project. We're so happy that you're here, Chao. Please join me all in welcoming her.
Thank you, Ray, and thank you to everyone who has taken the time to be here today. I must say that it is 10 p.m. in Nairobi, so if my energy is a bit low, it is because I am very well at the end of my day. But nonetheless, it's lovely to be here. I am a Black woman wearing a blue top. I have brass earrings, a nose ring, and a very wide smile. So today I will be speaking about my work, which, as Rhea mentioned, sits in the middle of heritage and history and technology, and seeing how those two worlds collide, really. I'm going to be sharing experiences from my work, but also from my personal life that have led me in many ways to this moment. Just gonna pull my screen. Yes, okay.
Do you see the image? Is it the right image? Everyone sees it?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the right image. So I'll begin with a story. The first museum I ever knew was my grandparents' house, and that's what you see on your screen. I grew up on the outskirts of Nairobi city, which is a very bustling, very rich, vibrant city in a part of Ngong town known as Zambia Stage. My grandparents are proud Maasai people who have held their culture in their hearts and even more so in their home. In the dining room and the living room, you can find beaded necklaces hanging from the wall, a traditional gourd used for storing milk and water, a pith helmet that I think belongs to my grandfather or belonged to him at one point or the other, and a beautiful Maasai shield dotted across various rooms. And you can see some of the items in the photo on the screen. Now, growing up here, I never really thought of these items as artifacts. I honestly still don't. They are part of the home as much as the home is a part of us. They gather dust, they get cleaned, we can wear them, we use them, we touch them. They are living within the space. If I was asked to describe these artifacts, I would begin by first asking my grandparents what these items signify in their lives. Why are they important to them? What do they mean? What are they made of? What are they used for? And for me, it's not so much about what the object is, it's about what it represents. My grandparents' house is the first museum I ever knew, but it certainly wasn't the last. For the past few years, my line of work has brought me in close proximity to museum practice. By day, I spend a lot of time thinking about how museums can make their collections accessible. And by night, I find myself thinking of ways to protect this data in ways that benefit the communities at hand. Now, data structures within museums are designed to standardize really large sets of information. So you have thousands of objects, sometimes even hundreds of thousands of objects from different communities in different regions, different knowledge systems that are distilled into columns and rows and standardized for the sake of access, for the sake of dissemination, search and retrieval and the likes. Now, what does it mean to kind of take very complex data like cultural heritage, people's identities, people's emotional and spiritual connections, and standardize this across, disparate communities and disparate languages, etc. I do think that the danger is not necessarily in trying to structure this data, but really the danger is in presenting this structured data that has been designed to fit a particular agenda as the final and complete set of knowledge, as the only legitimate set of knowledge. And so we have to, a question that I continually ask myself is, what do we erase when we are trying so hard to preserve? A lot of my work also looks at representation online, and through various experiments, I have attempted to venture out of what I have been taught in school and in formal systems to seek out what exists and is very much alive, quote unquote, informally. We can move to the next slide. Four years ago, I was fortunate enough to start an initiative called the Museum of British Colonialism with a group of incredible women. Now, we started this group and this volunteer collective because we had significant gaps in our histories, particularly around the history of colonialism. And we embarked on a mission to document not just what already exists in books and archives, but to document oral histories and first-hand experiences of people who lived through the colonial period. What did they remember? What did they go through? What did they lose? What changed them? And we took this data and attempted to, and are actually still doing it, to disseminate it in different formats, online, in videos, photographs, stills, but basically to share it in many ways. This experience has been challenging. It has been a learning opportunity, but at the same time, we've been exploring several things as we go. Now, when I speak about this project, one of the things that happens is that people ask me, how do you know someone is telling the truth? And I think this is a very interesting question when it comes to oral history, because what it shows is that the lived human experience has to continually prove its legitimacy. And for me, focusing on this history from the colonial period, that oral history of people who lived through it is forced to carry a burden that the archival records sitting in basements, in folders, do not have to carry. This has really strengthened my belief that the work and the power of digital methodologies is to excavate that which has been buried and misrepresented for a long time. And the reason that we should be spending, I mean, now we are spending so much money, millions of dollars, shillings, euros, pounds, you name it. We're spending a lot of money on digital infrastructure, migrating things online, building virtual worlds. And really, I think one of the questions we should be asking ourselves is, what is the impact of what we are doing? For me, in terms of history, in terms of heritage, I think that the work of technology is not only to make history accessible, it is to make history vulnerable. That digital tools are really the kind of things that we need to tear away at the notion that some forms of knowledge are more superior than others. And how do we use digital technology to kind of counter these items? Next slide, please. So I think this process of tearing down is also a process of, when you tear down something, it's also a process of creating an opportunity to rebuild. One of my favorite quotes says that ruin is the road to transformation. And so when we tear down existing structures, or when we attempt to really challenge things that have been embedded so deeply in society, I think the fact that accessing data is not enough. Just because data is accessible doesn't mean that it is creating impact. It doesn't mean that it is actually speaking to the needs of people. And it actually has the potential to replicate violence. And I'll speak to that in this next slide. When we digitize data, a lot of the time we assume that it's a good thing. And when I say data, please know that I am biased to museum data and cultural heritage data, so data around history in different forms. And the question for me is always, how do we make data more human? As I complete my session, I just like to say that I'd love to tell you this story of this photograph that I stumbled across online. It is a photo of I can't see the screen, 4 or 5 men taken in 1920 Kenya. What interested me about this photograph is the fact that the caption simply reads Kikuyu. Kikuyu is an ethnic group in Kenya. Kikuyu boys, one does not like the camera. And I was very haunted by this photograph because you can see the gentleman on the third from your right, or my right, is basically trying to hide under, using his French to sort of hide his face, clearly doesn't want the photograph to be taken or is not a part of this activity. Yet the caption really summarizes this entire encounter as one does not like the camera. So for me, it's very interesting that we have a lot of this data in museums, in archives, in libraries, in which Black people, particularly Indigenous people, are represented as curiosities, are spoken for, and are voiceless. And so if you transpose kind of the view of this photograph, instead of saying that one does not like the camera, you could also say one does not want to be photographed against their will, that they have their own agency. But when we're digitizing these collections, when they're putting them online, what does it mean to keep using the same captions, to keep using the same descriptors, to keep using the same names? What I'm interested in my line of work, but also in this discussion, is exploring digital technology as a form of freedom, as a form of mediation between worlds, but also challenging the perception that digital technology is neutral and it benefits everyone equally. So I know I have technically stolen Louise's spot, and I hope that he's back and that we can continue the session. But thank you very much. That's the end of my.
Chao, you had one more image, I think, here. There's or okay.
Oh yeah,
it's the same one, just notes. Okay, that's great. Please join me in thanking Chao for her remarks. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna stop this. Bring us back. I think Luis is attempting to join from his phone, mobile. Yes. And
we do have a couple of questions for Chao. I don't know if we want to take them now.
Let's take one maybe while we're getting Luis back online. Do you want to, Angela, you seem to have it in front of you.
I do. The first question is asking Chao, how do you decide what not to collect? And there is also Spanish translation of the questions in the document that I can repost here as well.
How do I decide what not to collect? That's an interesting question. I think I'd probably flip it, because the work that we've done, we are more guided by the gaps that we have. So we decide what we need to collect as opposed to what we don't want to collect. And so the work always starts with exploring what are the gaps that we have, what are the perspectives that we are missing, what are the voices that we're not hearing, and then intentionally seeking them out and looking for people who can speak to that or guide us on that. So I'm not really quite set out on a journey where I know what I'm not looking for. But I would say that I always start from the point of what weaknesses or what gaps do we have that we would like a perspective on, or yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Chao.
Thank you for the question.
Luis, how are you doing? Can you hear me? And maybe Rocio, you can let us know if you hear him.
Sí, Raya, apagué mi laptop y estoy con móvil, celular. Estoy mejor ahora.
Okay, great. We'd love to give the microphone back to you. So we're going back to Luis in Peru.
Muchas gracias. Bueno, así es la tecnología, ventaja y desventaja. Muchas gracias soy Luis Tayori, ¿no? Vengo de madre, yo soy del pueblo originario Aracmbot, así se llama, y está ubicado en la frontera con Brasil y Bolivia. Y mi exposición más lo quiero basar en la oralidad y quiero ser la parte más descriptiva, ¿no? Que es lo más difícil que es para mí. Y quiero centrarme en el ámbito de intervención donde yo vengo de manera colectiva en este pedazo de la Amazonía, ¿no? En Perú. Y el ámbito de intervención pues es una categoría. Ahí estamos. Hola.
Did we lose him, Rocio? Yeah. Luis, can you hear us? Okay. I think we had other questions in the doc, so let's
Hola.
move on. Let's move back to those. Oh, it's back. Okay. Great.
Sí, me escuchan ahora. Sí, como mencioné, quiero centrarme en el ámbito de trabajo, donde intervenimos de manera conjunta con las comunidades que administramos esta vacuna que es ejercido por el Estado, ¿no? Donde interactuamos con el gobierno a través de CERNAN, una institución que administra áreas protegidas en Perú y pueblos indígenas. El ámbito de intervención donde nosotros interactuamos son 10 comunidades, 3 pueblos que son Machiguenga, Aracmut y Yine. ¿Cómo administramos esta área, no? Administramos bajo un documento plasmado, un documento rector plasmado todas las demandas, donde priorizamos las necesidades de las comunidades bajo 5 componentes, que son área de gestión, área cultural, área ambiental, economía y social, ¿no? Y a través de un componente es como la tecnología se asoma, ¿no? En pueblos indígenas, ¿no? A través de ese componente se da acceso, ¿no? A estas herramientas, ¿no? Como la vigilancia tradicional, ahí empieza a dialogar, ¿no? Con equipos de tecnología para hacer los trabajos de monitoreo, ¿no? Para vigilar los territorios y tener una buena gobernanza en los territorios y esta área protegida. A través de esos conocimientos tradicionales, como se ha venido fusionando, ¿no? Con un GPS como tipo ladrillo para construcción de casas, y en la actualidad, ¿no? Un equipo moderno ha tenido un proceso, ¿no? De familiarización en el campo, y también cómo se introduce, ¿no? Los famosos aplicativos, ¿no? De código abierto, como se ha venido aprovechando en el área, y también, ¿no? El uso y manejo de drones de diversos tipos de usos, ¿no? En el área. Y acá, como ha tenido un proceso, ¿no? De la introducción de la tecnología, cómo convertirlo en un tema familiarizado, ¿no? En estos equipos, porque la tecnología, o sea, simplemente un celular, ¿no? En las comunidades nativas, un GPS, se puede adaptar, ¿no? Familiarizando las funcionalidades que tiene. Y a partir de ahí, de manera conjunta empezamos empezamos a hacer una estrategia como es que identificando un grupo humano de las 10 comunidades, muchos sin acceso a la escuela, muchos solamente con conocimientos tradicionales, los equipos que no se vean como estatus social, ¿no? Que los equipos solamente son para los académicos. O sea, ahí nosotros tenemos una labor importante como los equipos que vienen a los territorios, que no lo vean, o sea, como un estatus, ¿no? Que solamente manejan los universitarios, los académicos y los urbanos. Y ahí es la tarea importante, es como la estrategia es que las comunidades lo vean como una oportunidad, ¿no? De que estos sean equipos de complemento para una buena gobernanza. Y no solo ha sido, ¿no? El proceso ha sido también de caídas, ¿no? Y de levantadas. Se ha fracasado, ¿no? Algunos tecnología como de los aplicativos, ¿no? Se tuvo un aplicativo que se llamaba Epic Wallet, el Locus Pro, ¿no? Y ahí, eh, el reto que uno tiene, ¿no? De seguir explorando cómo estos también te dan muchas estrategias y cuáles son las ventajas, ¿no? De seguir teniendo como una fortaleza. Y estos aplicativos fracasan porque exclusivamente eran urbanos para las bicicletas, más latidos al corazón en las corridas de ciudad, y no se pretendían. Y durante muchos años nosotros con este fracaso se empieza a seguir, ¿no? Conversando, se empieza a seguir haciendo estrategia como los equipos de tecnología pueden ser complementarios, ¿no? Para los monitoreos del territorio, ¿no? Para salvaguardar los bosques, ¿no? Y a partir de ahí empieza a generar otro tipo de conversación porque estos aplicativos pues no te lo da el Estado, ¿no? Estos aplicativos como organización con la buena disponibilidad que tienen los aliados, que nosotros los llamamos los donantes, empiezan a tener esa responsabilidad, ¿no? No de transferir economía, sino de transferir esos conocimientos desde lo urbano hacia los territorios, ¿no? Y como un donante, un aliado pueda tener ese concepto que el indígena se pueda familiarizar con la herramienta, ¿no? Y empezamos también a conversar cómo se adapta la herramienta al proyecto. Y en este proceso importante que ha sido es que nosotros mismos hemos empezado a ser partícipes, ¿no? En esta oportunidad nosotros tenemos un buen aliado que es Digital Democracy, ¿no? Un colectivo que que ha sabido entender, ¿no? La colectividad y la independencia de los datos que los indígenas queremos formar como un centro de base, ¿no? Y ser independientes en nuestros trabajos. Y parte de ese trabajo encontramos también, ¿no? Que son los beneficios, ¿no? Como después de todo esto, como el uso de tecnología de riesgo, ¿no? De vida de los que recogen, por ejemplo, de los vigilantes, muchos lo llaman de los protectores de los bosques, acá lo llamamos vigilantes comunales. O sea, se reduce, ¿no? A ese riesgo de exponer, ¿no? Podemos encontrar en el bosque sembrío de coca, ¿no? Podemos encontrar actividades de minería ilegal y otros que alteran, ¿no? el ecosistema y a la vez también producen economía. Y en esta pandemia que también nos enseñó que este aplicativo minimizaba el riesgo también, ¿no? De que ya no era necesario entregar personalmente, sino también aprovechar, ¿no? Las opciones que tiene para mandar mediante correos, mediante WhatsApp y otros medios que hay opciones, ¿no? Para que pueda llegar, ¿no? Sin necesidad de que sea presencial, ¿no? Y los aplicativos, ¿no? También como se convierte, ¿no? En manos de un indígena, ¿no? Una herramienta poderosa legal, ¿no? Para visibilizar y denunciar lo que está sucediendo, ¿no? En sus territorios, ¿no? Y es importante mencionar, ¿no? Que hoy en día, pues, que como herramienta, también el indígena hoy en día, no solamente desaparece, ¿no? En personas, sino también como esta tecnología en parte no para registrar no solamente pasivos ambientales, sino también, ¿no? De que como un idioma se puede ser registrado, ¿no? En estos equipos. O sea, como estos equipos también te dan una fortaleza, ¿no? De encontrar una identidad propia y en base a eso trabajar, ¿no? Registrar, ¿no? Recuperar todo lo que es parte de un... Estos trabajos no sé, y nos ha fortalecido bastante porque de que la tecnología era como cómo te colonizaban, ¿no? Pero en otra parte tuvimos un reto de que nosotros le podríamos sacar una vuelta de que los datos que recogen, de que algunas partes, sitios sagrados de gran importancia cultural puedan ser reconocidos, ¿no? A través de resoluciones ministeriales del Estado, y fruto de ello es que con estos trabajos de tecnología hoy en día tenemos reconocidos, ¿no? Como patrimonio cultural dentro del lugar en Casa del Inca. Y hoy en día eh, eh, lo que tenemos es y los retos es que como la implementación realmente, porque funciona cuando un donante te da seguimientos, un donante te facilita recursos económicos para que herramienta siga siendo útil y los retos grandes que tenemos es ¿no? Para mostrar libertad de acceder a esta información y el indígena sea capaz de manejar, ¿no? Este sistema que nos ofrece, ¿no? A través de códigos abiertos, también salvaguardar. Hola. Hola, Rocío, eso sí o no, un poco para extenderme y mostrar, ¿no? Un poco también como parte de un reto de esta invitación, no es la fotografía, ¿no? Sino también es seguir dando la importancia a la oralidad, ¿no? En espacios que nos ha invitado. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Luis. Please join me in thanking Luis for sharing with us, despite the challenges and the gaps in the digital infrastructure that we're using. Thanks so much for being with us, Luis. I have some questions, but I think there are a bunch in the document, and maybe we just go to there. And let's see. We have one that starts. I think it can apply to both, perhaps. So I'm gonna read it in English, and Rocio will provide it in Spanish. And again, if you would like to read the questions as they're in the doc, there's the link again. If you would prefer to ask a question out loud, you can raise your hand, use the raise your hand function in Zoom. Oftentimes, we do not mention the cost of infrastructure, not only regarding its material scope, but also what it implies for a community to sustain these infrastructures. In Latin America, many infrastructures that have come from the community have not been sustained because the communities no longer have the capacity for it. How do you manage this question of the sustainability of infrastructure, thinking in the long term? And maybe, Chao, do you feel like you can answer this one? Maybe we can start with you. It was directed at you first.
I'd say that for us and the work that we've done, that I think looking at sustainability as something that happens throughout, because often we look at sustainability as something that happens after the work is done. And that's when we think of sustainability. That's when we, but factoring it into, so when I work with museums and libraries, I try as much as possible to factor things like caring for the data, archiving the data, even into funding applications themselves. So having the financial resource when we begin projects to say, can we take care of these projects long term? But also training, I think, is a big capacity building is a big factor in sustainability, because when you have a high turnover or a space in which people are constantly moving, then the kind of legacy and the knowledge and practice keeps getting erased every time. And so as an institution or as a community, how do we have custodians who are able to pass on this information and this know-how to the next person, or to the to someone else who's maybe an apprentice? But I do feel that the question on sustainability is not answered. It has to be a combination of many things. It has to be a combination of capacity, of skills, of funding, of access to infrastructure. And so when we speak about sustainability, we also have to say that it doesn't exist in a vacuum of which you just need to do one thing and it's sustainable. You have to do, I'd say, and need to think about many things along the way and after to make it sustainable and a kind of holistic view towards sustainability that's not placed on one person or one thing, but as a collective practice throughout.
I think that makes a lot of sense, Chao, and I think will resonate with many of our projects and teams as they're thinking about sustainability of different kinds of projects, for sure. Luis, would you like to say anything on the question of sustainability or preservation over time?
Sí, gracias. Sabemos que la sostenibilidad en diferentes ángulos es bien difícil, inclusive sostener una familia es bien difícil, ¿no? Y con estas lecciones aprendidas, creemos que las capacidades locales queden, ¿no?, en los territorios, ¿no? Y hay una estrategia, ¿no?, a través de documento estratégico que manejamos, ¿no?, no solamente en la institución con las 10 comunidades, que las capacidades locales puedan quedarse en las comunidades, porque sabemos que puede ser una moda, ¿no?, introducir un aplicativo en un territorio y para evitar de discusiones para que esto no caiga abajo. Puede suceder, pero sí, como mencioné, o sea, es bien difícil de sostener, ¿no? Y también tiene que aplicar las propias comunidades que no solamente es entregar tu conocimiento en tecnología, sino esto vaya a el 50%, ¿no?, de atención a la tecnología, ¿no?, para que no sea un fracaso total.
Great. Thank you, Luis. I have a short follow-up maybe for Chao. Luis has talked about the processes of how he's kind of the group that he's with has engaged different players. And he's mentioned several times this document that kind of lays out the goals and how they've used it as a map or as a backbone for interfacing with different players and different collaborations. Chao, would you like to tell us a little bit about some of the processes or like the collaborations that you've been a part of in building the different projects that you founded? How have you engaged local communities alongside an international players, institutes? Do you feel like this process part is a big part of the work? I'd be keen to hear how you're conceptualizing it, if you're willing.
Process is very much a big part of the work. For me, it's always been very, very important to not just document, not just show the end product of what we do, but also how we got there. And so with the digitization projects that we've worked on with museums and particularly a library here in Nairobi, we have had the documentation of what we are doing and why we are doing it. That has been shared both to the funders, to the public as well. We have found that video documentation is a much more accessible way for people, at least for our audiences here in Kenya and for our funders. And so a lot of the times people really don't know what's going on in museums and libraries. And when you open that up, it really engages or it brings together your audiences. So definitely documenting the process, documenting the decisions that were made, documenting the people who are there. It seems like the very, very boring part of data work, but I think it's such a crucial point because when you look at the afterlife of data and the care of data, at the end of the day, you need to go back to people and you need to ask questions about things you don't understand. And so if you don't have this kind of breadcrumbs, it's very hard to build a picture of what happened the more the years go by. Another thing that at the moment we're trying to do is sort of document a blueprint of the projects one of the projects that we've done. So we're in the process of writing a step-by-step document, just saying this is how we went through it, and with the hopes of developing some kind of toolkit as well. This is particularly related to the projects around oral history, and a lot of people want to do this, but they don't know where to start. And so we want to also open up not just the data, but also the skills that are needed for people to generate this data on their own. So yes, documentation is a big part of the work that we do, and is very integral, I think, to the success of digital projects as a whole. Thank you.
That's
for
beautiful.
sharing.
Yeah, thank you. Angela has some links of your work there that are going into the chat. Thank you, Angela. Okay, there are two more questions that I'm going to try to combine into one and give it back to both speakers. And they're on the question of outreach or growing. So there's a question asking for advice for other communities looking to explore community-owned and governed data infrastructure. And then as a second part of that question, how do you both think about growing your existing communities and enrolling new members to become active in your efforts? Maybe Luis, would you go first?
Sí, lo que acaba de exponer más se basa, ¿no? en el custodio de los territorios. Sí hay un impacto positivo, hay una gran expectativa por parte nuestra, por parte indígena, en primer primar, que es a estos aplicativos, tienen que codiseñar, ¿no? Nosotros codiseñamos con un aliado, codiseñamos según al tipo de geografía, los diferentes realidades que existen en las comunidades, y en base a eso estructuran, ¿no? Esta configuración en un territorio, ¿no? Y es muy importante, ¿no? Confiar también en tecnología, o sea, no confiar en el de que va a ser complemento de tu trabajo, va a ser complemento donde puedas visibilizar lo que la oralidad no puede. Es importante donde que te va a visibilizar de tu territorio para afuera. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Luis. The question again, I'll put it to Chao. one thing like advice you would share for other communities looking to explore or build out community-owned data infrastructure? Data can be museum data or otherwise. And how do you think about reaching new members, bringing new members into the fold? You kind of talked about it a little bit in the answer to your last question in terms of skill sharing.
I would say biggest piece of advice I can give based on and what we've seen before is to demystify the process. A lot of time people stay out because they feel that they can't come in. And this basically means that if something appears too complicated or too exclusive or is not friendly towards people who want to ask questions, who want to learn, then people will not come to you really, or people will not be interested in what you're doing. And so demystifying the processes, making spaces of learning as well. So it's not just experts talking between themselves, but also saying, if you want to know more about this process, this is how you can do it, or you have open days, workshops, just making it a space that people can learn and should not be afraid to ask questions. So I find that demystifying processes leads to more participation, leads to more questions, leads to people giving you things that you didn't even ask for. So in our context, a lot of the time when we share an oral history interview, people come out and say, well, this happened to my grandfather too. Here's a photograph of him, or this happened then, take this. And so the impact that data point has on getting someone to relate with it so emotively that they give you something that is a personal heirloom, for me, that's very powerful in the ways in which data can connect people. And finally, after or in the process of fostering and encouraging participation, I think we also have to be aware that bringing in new audiences, bringing in people also is a resource question. And so there's so much you can do. There's only so much you can do without resources, but obviously with resources, with financial resource, then the more people you can reach, and also the better, the more you can accommodate people's time, people's energy, because the opposite of that is burnout, which is a reality that we faced, and I'm sure many people have faced before. So I'm just saying that in as much as I'm talking about all these things to bring people in, they're not existing in a world where resource is infinite. We are working with finite resources. Yeah.
I think that's really important, Chao, both that emphasis on demystifying the processes and then recognizing you need resources to grow. It can't happen out of nothing. Yeah, it's really important. Would anybody like to speak a question? We are here. I want to hold space if anybody would like to say it out loud. Okay, then I would love for you all to join me in thanking our speakers. Thank you, Chao. Thank you, Luis. Thank you, Rocio. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing of your work and your experience with us. I'm going to stop the recording